Good afternoon, everybody, my fellow Rotarians. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces today. It is Thursday and it is the happiest day of the week, and I'm so happy to be with all of you. To get us started today are our greeters, Paul Shockey and Chris Rankin.
Good to see all of you, and welcome back to Rotary.
Chris, are you still there?
Chris?
I see now his photo and he appears to be on mute.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I was muted there. Excuse me. Welcome to Rotary, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for joining in today. We have the Pledge of Allegiance to get us started with Kate Loeb, and that is a recorded piece.
Just a second, Jennifer, you crossed me up, so I'm not ready with that one yet. Give me a second.
Okay, fair enough. Do you want me to just do a tap dance for you?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't see it because I'm seated and on a Zoom screen, but the feet are moving, everybody.
You could get on the table, Jennifer.
You know, I have been known to do a good table dance, but it was in my youth. I am hoping that that time is now sunsetted for me.
Okay, here we go.
All right, thank you, Dwayne.
This is Finley and Brody Miller saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, you guys nailed it.
Oh, that's very precious. I'm so glad Kate would share that with us. Now we are moving on to our invocation, and this is also a pre-recorded piece done by Tim Carlson.
In my own way, being very happy simply for that. Good afternoon. I woke up this morning seeing the sun shine, and in my own way, being very happy simply for that. Maybe it's age. It reminded me of this quote: "For you shall go out in joy and led forth in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall break forth into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands." Isaiah 55, verse 12. This verse from Isaiah in the Old Testament Hebrew could be a wonderful cry even today. We're constantly battling with our own nature without heeding the warnings about our own nature we live in, taken for granted too often as our environment. I do it, and I'm afraid too many of us take it for granted. Any thoughts and pauses to reflect on that with pledges to action are really pledges to our future and that of our children. The great prior St. Francis of Assisi gave us the following prayer entitled Canticle of the Creatures, in which I hope you will join me, respecting the fact that all who see a higher power can benefit from even a secular view of this remarkable insight into what surrounds us and should continue to benefit us in our future. Please join me in prayer. All praise be yours, my Lord, through all you have made. And first, my Lord, brother sun, brings the day. How beautiful is he, how radiant in all his splendor. Of you most high, who bears the likeness. All praise be yours, my Lord, through sister moon and stars. In the heavens you have made them, bright and precious and fair. All praise be yours, my Lord, through brothers wind and air. All praise be yours, my Lord, through sister water, so useful, lowly, precious, and pure. All praise be yours, my Lord, through brother fire, through whom you brighten up the night. All praise be yours, my Lord, through sister earth, our mother, who feeds us and produces various fruits with colored flowers and herbs. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks, and serve him with great humility in this, the world given to us by the Most High to care for and bring us peace. Amen.
That was wonderful. We thank Tim for sharing that pre-recorded invocation. Now we're going to move forward with some different announcements. You know, you Rotarians are going places, and one of the places you've been going to a lot this week is Zoom. I'm aware of about 11 different meetings on Zoom for different Rotary projects. I've been honored to get to participate in almost all of them, which is keeping me very busy. But I want to share with you just very briefly some different things that you may have seen across your email and some other things that are occurring within the context of our committees. But the first one of those is one of the places we want you Rotarians to go to is your computer. If you have not already had an opportunity to complete the survey that Carolyn sent out regarding your opinions on returning to meetings in person, please do so. We did realize technical difficulties, as they are sometimes learning new technology, that we didn't really leave much space for commenting on that survey. So if you have some comments and want to share them, please send them in an email to Carolyn. She's compiling all that information and going to report back to that committee this week. So we'll look forward to hearing the results of that. Another couple of places you Rotarians are going to is that several of you expressed a desire to volunteer with the vaccination site that is at the Sun Dome. They no longer need actual volunteers at that site, but the health department has sent out a call for volunteers to help with a vaccine appointment call center. There's specific instructions of the type of skills that they're looking for that it's going to be sent out in an email to you later on today, again with instructions as to how to respond to that particular call for volunteers. So if you're interested in participating in that, take a look again in your email box for that later on today. Other things going on. You heard a little sneak peek from John Cooper already earlier before our meeting actually officially started about what is going on with the Youth Service Committee, building these amazing desks for students who are doing, still that distance learning and don't have a workspace in their homes. Those kiddos from Adams Elementary School are going to have that beautiful desk probably next week, and we're looking forward to sharing some pictures and follow-up of that project, but that's going on with additional construction this weekend. Your club service committee has been busy at work, working on the continued planning of the Rotary playground at the Greenway. I've asked them to put together an announcement for us next week so that you can see a schematic and just get an update of the timeline, but that is a massive project, and we thank both Dave Brown and Sunny Cameron, as well as David Links and Kelly Connaughton for continued work behind the scenes on that. Your Racial Justice Ad Hoc Committee has been really busy working on drafting language in support of promoting vaccination within our community, so you'll hear more about that moving forward. And then our Ways and Means Committee has been working on Yakima Rotary, A Century of Service. That's going to be an hour-long television show on CAP TV that airs on May 13th at 7 o'clock that is going to celebrate Rotary's commitment to our community. It's also going to be our big fundraiser. So again, you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. And if you already haven't seen it, District 5060 is working on their Club Spring training experience, and that's going to be coming up on Saturday, May 1st. So boy, oh boy, your Rotarians are going places. Keep up all the wonderful work that you do in the community. It's really exciting that despite being online and on Zoom, this amazing club is moving forward and doing so much good work in the Valley. So thank you all for that. Now we've got Sheriff Bob Udell as our Sergeant at Arms. Sheriff, are you there?
See, and my unbelievable opening has just been wasted. Well, welcome from the Bat Cave of the Sheriff's Office, where the crime rate is literally zero. But today we're going to talk about something other than crime, which I always enjoy talking about. So I'm ready. Dwayne, key me up. March Madness. That's right, everybody. March Madness. Some of you may know what it is. Some may not. So we'll educate you. Okay, here we go. Next slide. What does March Madness mean? Is it A, the annual NCAA Division I basketball tournament? B, the month in which your spouse is determined you will start working in the yard? The mad cow disease hits its peak that month? Or D, the realization that taxes are due only weeks away? Oh, If you've guessed A, the annual basketball tournament, that is correct. Everyone else needs to pay $1. And as a bonus prize, if you know what mad cow disease is, that's $1 as well. All right, next slide. Where did the term March Madness come from? A, from the fanaticism of basketball fans. B, the feelings generated by UCLA's win record in the tournament. C, a 1939 essay about the Illinois high school basketball. Or D, the desperation of WSU fans to get their team into the tourney. I know that feeling. So the answer is C, came from 1939. Gentleman wrote about Illinois high school basketball, March Madness, and it is spread all across the country. All right, on to the next one. Oh, here's a good one. How many teams are selected for the March Madness tournament? 68, 32, 136, or 64? Well, I'm seeing quite a few correct answers. The correct answer is 68. They have the first 4 to determine the final field of 64. So congratulations. If you didn't get 68, that's $1. All right, moving on. What is the stage of the tournament called when only 16 teams remain? A, the chosen few. B, 16 candles. C, the dirty dozen. Or D, the sweet 16. Now, I made this one kind of easy. One answer is obviously wrong. 16 candles. So the answer is D, the sweet 16. You can see the Zags there celebrating their getting into the sweet 16. All right, next. What tradition does the winning team perform after regional wins, including the championship game? A, they perform an interpretive dance to Basketball Jones. They cut down the basketball nets, or each player does the number of push-ups corresponding to the number of points he or she has scored. The answer is not the interpretive dance. It is C, or B, excuse me, B. They cut down the basketball nets. So next, here's the bonus question. Which team member cuts the final strand of the net? Is it the center, the water boy, the guard? The answer is, oh, I see correct answers. It's the coach. The coach. If you got that one right, you pay $2 because, yes, you're obviously watching too much and letting your lawn grow. Okay, next. Next slide. Oh, it is a tradition across the United States to participate in March Madness brackets. And there it is. Look at all that. Next slide. How much is bet annually on March Madness? Is it A, 8.5 billion, B, 2 billion, C, 50 billion, or D, $15 billion? The answer is A, $8.5 billion. That's a lot of cash, unless, you tell your wife much differently. I'm sure they think it's much less than that. Okay, next. How many people attend the March Madness in person? A, 2.5 million, B, 1.0 million, C, 660,000, or 1.5 million. How many? Go to the games. Geez, Amy's been nailing it. It is C, 660,000 people every year go to March Madness games in person. If you have gone to a game in person, it's $1. If you've been to the Final Four, that's $5. And if you have been lucky enough to go to a national championship game, $10. There you go. All right, next. I think we've got a bonus one on this one. Oh, the total TV viewers. Hit it again, Dwayne. It is 11 million people watch March Madness every year. All right, next. Which Washington team traditionally gets invited and is the #1 seed this year? Is it the Washington State Cougars, Gonzaga, University of Washington, or Central Washington State University? Okay, I kind of gave you one. Central Washington is not a Division I school. The Cougs, as much as I love them, the answer is B, the Zags. Bring up the last slide, and there they are. If you're a Zag fan, that is $5 right there. Thanks, everybody, for your time. And, I've gone over a little bit. I'm done.
All right, thank you so very much, Sheriff. Appreciate that. And I know Quinn was really excited to see that last slide, although I guess you have a $5 fine now. Worth it to pay $5 to be a ZAG.
That's right.
I imagine it is. Indeed, indeed. Now with our speaker introduction, Sherry Maruza. Sherry.
Hey, fellow Rotarians. It's great to be back and seeing everybody since I presented last December. And today, instead of being a presenter, I get the privilege of introducing my colleague, the Senior or Vice President of Real Estate Transactions at Forterra. Tobias has a wealth of knowledge and expertise and passion about all things created land. And outside of the seriousness of land, he's pretty fun and quirky and just a great colleague to be around. Tobias has worked abroad in the Middle East and Asia. He's got quite the stellar resume in his education itself. He's a graduate of Duke University, of the Sorbonne, was a Fulbright scholar, and graduate from the University of Delhi. And he's got a lot to share with you today about Forterra. His resume really could start his own probably 10th chapter of his own autobiography someday. And so it's a great privilege to introduce you to my colleague with Forterra, Tobias Levey. And thank you for the welcome, everybody. We like being here.
Well, thanks, Sherry. Thanks for having me and on giving us a chance to talk about what we're doing as Forterra. We're really lucky to work with your fellow member Sherry and see what the amazing community upper and lower can do working together. And it's something I feel we're losing on the west side amongst other places. And the example that is being set by community here is an inspiration to a lot of us in other places. And I think it's hard to add value for you when talking in 10 minutes. I think the thing that I can share that I think is most relevant is that every place that I've lived, because it's a theme of my life. I've lived in 12 different cities in 8 different countries over 35 years since I was a kid. So I love it when Sherry says you're fourth generation, and because it's such a different experience. All of the places that I've lived are facing the same challenge that we're facing. They're seeing their people sleeping in the streets, and they're seeing the forest burn around them, and they're seeing that government simply doesn't have the money to solve for it. And it needs more creative solutions than just another tax dollar at another problem. And that's our challenge in our little way at Forterra, is to try to align private business interests with public good. And it's our feeling that those are becoming increasingly disconnected as the population gets denser. And it's, in some ways, we feel like Thomas Jefferson, that when a society tips at some point from agrarian to urban, a value system is lost. We feel very affected by that ourselves. Most of us at Forterra don't have the opportunity to live in the countryside, not to mention to touch the land in different ways. We also feel that it's possible that there were moments, many moments in US history where they were aligned. And while extreme wealth and polarization is de-aligning them, decoupling them, it's also an enormous opportunity for a small number of people to make a huge difference. And for us, it's really in two areas. It's forests, farms, working forests and working farms on the one hand, and our homes on the other. And how can we connect or reconnect those? Do we have to build so many now of our homes and our buildings, especially in the downtown areas, out of imported steel and imported concrete? Is that really necessary in a place that has the natural resources that Washington has? And there's a lot of incentives in both directions. We're hoping we can do that in a small way, and that we'll be invited into the community here to do that, especially on the housing side. There are, from what we see, a pretty urgent need for the workforce housing, the people cleaning our homes and serving us in restaurants. And if we can make a difference and do that out of domestic timber, and make them beautiful and make them historically part of communities, we can make an impact on those families' lives who will live there. So that's what Forterra wants to do. We, of course, have been working on the forest side for many years out here at Teanaway Community Forest. And most recently, you might be aware of what we called the Van Wyck transaction. It was 4,500 acres, not that far from Cowiche, that really enabled an elk corridor to pass through. And now a series of smaller properties, we're working with landowners who wish to donate their lands so that they're protected in perpetuity. That's our stewardship program. And lastly, we're really trying to ramp up a farm program where farmers who do not wish to subdivide their property into either commuter areas or city areas, instead can receive the replacement value for what profit that would have brought, and use that money towards continuing farm operations. It's conservation easement, for those of you who don't know that mechanism. So that's what we're up to. I think that's 10 minutes. Yeah, we can talk. So TDR is another interesting one. It's similar to what I just talked about with farms, where we actively buy development rights off of farm properties and then sell those development rights into the city. So a downtown developer can add a housing unit, but have contributed to a farm remaining a farm. We also are working to bridge those working forests to housing by investing in a, it's called a mass timber plant up in Snohomish County in Darrington, which is the, well, I should go into what mass timber is. It's very large wood panels. They were industrialized in Europe in the 1990s. They actually were patented in Tacoma, however, in 1923. They're the best shot we believe we have right now at prefabricated Lego type housing. Mostly they're made in Europe. The plant that we're working on would make them again out of Washington product and lower the cost of housing. We hope sufficiently to enable the type of median income that I talked about earlier. And we feel very strongly that if we can't all pull on our natural resource levers and our charity for those sleeping on the streets at the same time, we might actually just be passing one problem into another problem. So if we're concentrating too much wealth of natural resources outside of the workforce that surrounds us, how can they afford a home? So that's the challenge. It's the more we get into it, the more complicated we realize it is, but the points in the chain that we've decided to focus on are construction cost, single largest investment of most people's lives, their home. So if we can just lower that baseline cost through prefabricated manufacturing, it leads to a degree of affordability. And we're also focusing on working forest practice and trying to, this is something historically Forterra has always tried to do, break down this division between environmentalism and commercial logging. And we're, I would say Sherry's showing me a list, the most recent numbers for us, we're doing around 65 of these forest and farm purchases per year. And right now we're entitling enough downtown land to support 1,000 new affordable housing units, which is a drop in the bucket, but we hope a precedent for how to use Washington resources to do that. Any question? I can leave it there.
We've got quite a bit of time for questions, Tobias. So if you don't mind, I'd like to open it up for people to go ahead and unmute.
Tobias, how vertically integrated is the organization? I mean, I'm hearing a lot about, you know, controlling the resource. I'm hearing a little bit about manufacturing. Can you discuss, you know, from A to Z, how involved you are in this process? Do you bring in subcontractors for pieces of work? How do you interface with urban areas and planning commissions and things like that?
Mm-hmm. So that it's taken a lot of hard thinking to decide on which way we should, how far up and down the supply chain to go. And when we really started down the track of researching this about 5 years ago and talking to the producers of this wood material or talking to general contractors or subcontractors, we were always hearing a similar story, which was if I was just one step up in the supply chain, if I were just that much closer to the material that I use my time to form, which is my profession, I would be able to do X. And so the most applicable example for us of that was every mass timber manufacturing plant that we visited in North America that make these panels said, the real problem is we don't have the ability to saw any trees. We're just the plant that presses 2x together and makes these panels. And what that meant was that their business was completely dependent on the lumber price. So they had a manufacturing business dependent on the most volatile index in the last 12 months, right? So lumber prices have doubled roughly since the beginning of COVID, which meant they could give their customers, the people who build the affordable housing, complete uncertainty about what the price of the housing unit would be, which then of course has to be built into the financial model of the bank as a risk, which makes the money more expensive, which again makes the housing unit even more expensive. So this uncertainty within the supply chain was is compounding itself into contingencies that when you drill down are in the 30–40% range. We found 5 stages of vendor between us and $1 million LVL order at one point. So we, a Seattle nonprofit, were ordering $1 million of laminated veneer lumber from Weyerhaeuser Corporation, and there were 5 middle people. So we will go as far up the chain as we feasibly can. The danger is that you create so many dependencies within your own supply chain when you do that, that you lose one and you bring the whole thing down. And that's where being a nonprofit is super important, because the donors, our donors are asking us to do this experiment on the off chance it gives more people homes that fit their salaries. It's risky.
I have a question. My question is this, Tobias. My understanding of Forterra, since I went to work for the Greenway and started researching a lot of what you do, originally, wasn't Forterra set up as you're not a land trust, but you helped acquire land for conservation purposes and things like that. And now I'm hearing that Forterra is now moving in the direction of helping to provide more affordable housing construction. Is that an accurate assumption, or have you always been had both of those as your mission?
We've always had them. So the conservation work has been bigger and more prominent and more traditional because it comes out of the Sierra Club world that has a long tradition. But one of the main innovations of our founder, Jean Duvernoy, was that he could have a conversation with the CEO of Weyerhaeuser, and he could have a conversation with the head of the Sierra Club and have them shake hands at the end of the conversation. And I think David, it was your question, if they are truly united in a single supply chain, then the benefit of the harvest of the timber for the housing is to the benefit of the conservation. They really are the same problem. So the housing has become much bigger in the past 4 years. Prior to real housing, we would, for example, broker three-way agreements between a tribe and a historic, thinking of Snoqualmie Falls here, where the tribe could keep its sacred site and water rights could be protected, but also homes could be built in a subdivision some miles away that subsidized the conservation of that land. So we've always tried to play that role. We've never gone this far down the supply chain, that's for sure.
Tobias, what is your donor base? I mean, I assume you have some real large donors, some modest donors. Do you have any businesses or business entities that support your work?
Of course. So we have two main sources of funding. One is traditional tax-deductible philanthropy, and there are some incredible families and individuals who have given us either what we call revolving funds, which is funds we can buy a property, but then the property is taken out by Forest Service and then the money comes back and we revolve it again. So we have large revolving donors. We have the $10 donors. I would say it's about a 70-30 split between the big, 70 being the big ones and 30 being the small ones. Grants are huge. So we raised about $20 million in grants last year. And we probably raised about $5 million in pure philanthropy.
Now comes the social and environmental justice.
And the last one, as Sherry's saying, is now what we call social impact investment. And that is a new middle space in the investment world where investors invest. We call it the Strong Communities Fund, but they get a 2% return. It is not a 15% real estate fund. It is not a treasury. It is not an 8% Vanguard. It's a 2%. It is highly securitized because it purchases real estate, so there are real assets there, but there is no infinite upside to the investor. And that has been an incredibly effective tool because the money, 2%, is just cheaper enough than commercial bank debt that it allows us to really spend our time on innovation and trying to work towards a better housing system. It just gives us that much more breathing room. So that net difference is a big funder for us.
I had a quick question. So I know with back to your land preservation and conservancy, with the acquisition of the Teanaway, that was a pretty significant one. And I know you're still have some investments over in the Olympic range and Cascades. Where are you kind of looking at continuing that acquisition strategy and preservation kind of going forward?
So we're about 75 people. Of those, Sherry is full-time, obviously, out here and for Eastern Washington, and we have an additional, I would say it's 3 full-time equivalent. It's pieces of individual people dedicated to Eastern Washington. That's from 1 3 years ago. So this is a very important place for us because of the beauty of the natural landscape and the wish of people to do good here. Traditionally, we were the land trust of King County, and then we merged with the land trust of Snohomish County and of Kittitas County. And so we became multi-county. Our rule is generally, it shouldn't be more than a day's drive because it starts to disperse the culture of the organization. We want to be local to a 4-hour radius. We do remain very involved with the peninsula. We are involved with also now the purchase of property for urban parks for Black communities, Latinx communities that don't, that can't live near a public park. That's a big focus for us. Anything where land can play a role within that radius, we will try to work.
So back to the question I asked Tobias, and maybe you addressed it and I missed it, but your corporate support, you have a lot of corporate support since you're trying to work with local harvests of products? And
I wish we had more. The timber companies have been very generous in donating when we conserve a property. So that's wonderful support. We have not, I think we're just young enough at 30 years that our brand isn't recognized. Our brand is complex. It's an ampersand symbol because it's and. We're trying to go and to the next stage in the supply chain. And we're still finding out, I think, at each stage where corporations can help and can support us and can be on mission. I think historically, it's a natural cooperation with the timber industry. We're now starting to partner more with the healthcare industry, but small businesses too, especially in the 3 core counties where we operate.
With all this move to ESG kind of investing, the corporations could be doing good work, goodwill by investing in the work you guys are doing, sounds like. Maybe they get some plus points on their credit score or on their investment scores that would make them more attractive as where other consumers want to purchase their stock or whatever.
We would love that. There are land trusts that have gotten so big that they need that now. It's become a dependency. So we want to ride we want to ride the balance of being able to stay in business, but we also want to act in the mission of the communities where we work and not on behalf of full-on corporations. So it's a balance.
He's about to.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Tobias, I've got one more question. So what is your goal in the next 10 years? Do you have a certain number of housing developments, affordable housing developments that you want to see across the Pacific Northwest in the next 10 years? Do you have a number or how much more land are you going to need to acquire in order to be able to build that? What's your goal?
So we have real stats, but the more I quote them, the more meaningless they seem to be, because one small thing can be so much more important than one big thing. But the highlights are, so over 30 years, we've transacted into conservation, or working forest us as form of conservation, into conservation 280,000 acres roughly, and about, I think it's now $600 million of equity and about $1.5 billion of debt to complement that equity for those transactions. That was done at a time when TNOA, for example, were possible. We believe that there is a wave of TIMO, of timber company exits coming up, because it is much easier for these companies to go to Georgia, and you have fast growing southern yellow pine there, and the regulatory regime is much lighter. We would love to gear up our resources now to be ready in 5 years when we think this is going to happen, to be able to play a role in those being very well tended working forests. To put an acreage number on it, we've said within 10 years, we've said 100,000 acres and 100,000 acres of conservation and 1,000 affordable housing units.
Well, hearing no additional questions, I want to thank you both so very much for coming and speaking to us today. In honor of you being here, we are going to make a donation in your name to Yakima Rotary Charities to continue the good works that we're doing in the community. And again, thank you so much for being on. We're going to wrap up our meeting with our Rotarians Are Going Places segment with Mike Hummel. Mike.
Thank you, Jennifer. I have the honor of doing today's Rotarians Are Going Places, and today we're highlighting Rob Vickers. Rob joined Downtown Rotary 4 years ago. As many of you know, Rob is very talented, sharing his talents in theater and song with us often, and he always has a smile on his face and is a big joy to be around. But he is on the move professionally. He has recently joined Capital Advisors Wealth Management LLC after 26 years in the financial planning industry. In 2001, Rob completed his advanced studies in comprehensive financial planning at the American College in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. I apologize if I mispronounced that. There he earned a chartered financial consultant designation. And prior to becoming a financial planner, Rob spent 13 years in broadcast television and radio, including 4 years in the Air Force as an overseas military correspondent with the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service. Congratulations to Rob on a new career move, and I'm sure he's going to do wonderful things over there with the Capital Advisors Wealth Management Group.
All right, thank you so much for that highlight, Mike. We appreciate it. Next week's program, we're going to be joined by Kate Evans to talk about the success of the Cosmic Crisp apple. Following that, more Apple news. John Devaney is going to talk to us about protecting Washington's food system and the workforce. And then after that, we'll be joined by Yakima Police Chief Matt Murray to talk about community policing. Look forward to those programs and seeing your smiling faces each Thursday moving forward. And with that, we are officially adjourned. Thank you all.